I never thought I'd be the guy telling a story like this. You always hear about infidelity happening to someone else, never to you. But here I am, trying to make sense of how it all came crashing down around me. My wife, Emily, and I had been married for 8 years. From the outside, everything seemed perfect. We had a comfortable life, a nice home, and plans for the future that included kids, vacations, and everything that came with it. I thought we were happy. At least, I thought she was happy. It started with small things, as it always does. I noticed Emily was going to the doctor a lot more frequently than usual. She'd complain about headaches, stomach aches, or just feeling off. At first, I was concerned, worried that something was seriously wrong with her health. I remember asking her if she wanted me to come with her to one of these appointments, but she always waved me off. "No need, babe," she'd say with a smile. "It's just routine checkups. Dr. Lewis says it's probably stress." Dr. Lewis had been our family doctor for a few years. He was a well-respected man in his late 40s, always professional, always calm. I never once thought to question his integrity. In fact, I trusted him completely. Whenever Emily would come home from one of her appointments, she seemed lighter, relaxed. I chalked it up to her feeling better after the checkups. Maybe the peace of mind that came with a clean bill of health. But then, it started getting strange. Emily would be gone longer than usual for these appointments. Sometimes she'd come back late in the evening, saying Dr. Lewis had to fit her in between other patients. I noticed she would spend extra time getting ready for these visits, doing her hair, putting on makeup, wearing outfits that seemed a little too nice for a simple doctor's visit. But whenever I questioned her, she'd just laugh it off, saying she didn't want to look sick. One day, after Emily left for yet another appointment, I got a call from work. They told me I had been approved for an extra week of vacation, and I immediately thought of surprising her. Maybe we could plan a getaway, something to ease the stress she'd been dealing with. I decided to head to her doctor's office and surprise her after her appointment. I had no idea what I was walking into. The doctor's office wasn't far from our house, and as I pulled into the parking lot, I saw Emily's car. I smiled to myself, thinking about how she'd react when I popped in. But as I walked toward the entrance, something gnawed at me, a strange feeling in my gut. Maybe it was the fact that it was already 6 p.m., and I knew the clinic's regular hours ended at 5. Why was she still here? When I reached the door, I paused, looking through the glass window. Inside, the waiting area was dark, the front desk empty. I hesitated for a second, then decided to walk in anyway, figuring I could wait for her. As I stepped into the quiet hallway, that strange feeling in my gut grew stronger. Something wasn't right. The clinic was eerily quiet. My footsteps echoed as I made my way down the hallway, past empty exam rooms and dark offices. I was trying to shake the growing feeling of unease in my chest, telling myself that it was nothing, that Emily was probably just finishing up her appointment. But my instincts were screaming at me that something was wrong. Then, I heard voices, muffled, barely audible through a closed door. I recognized the soft, low murmur of Emily's voice, and my heart skipped a beat. Maybe they were just finishing up, I thought. Maybe she was getting some final instructions from Dr. Lewis. But then, I heard something else. Laughter. It was light, flirtatious, and it sent a shiver down my spine. That wasn't the kind of laugh you shared with your doctor during a routine checkup. I stopped just outside the door, my hand hovering near the knob, unsure of what to do next. Part of me wanted to turn around and walk away, to ignore whatever was happening on the other side. But another part of me, one that I couldn't ignore, needed to know. I leaned in closer, pressing my ear to the door, straining to make out their conversation. What I heard next made my blood run cold. "I can't believe we're doing this again," Emily whispered, her voice breathless, but playful. "Don't worry," came Dr. Lewis's calm, steady voice. "No one suspects a thing." My breath caught in my throat. No, this couldn't be happening. I felt my legs weaken beneath me as I realized what I had just heard. I staggered back from the door, my mind racing. The woman I had loved for 8 years, the person I trusted with my life, was cheating on me. With our doctor, I must have stood outside that door for minutes, maybe hours. It felt like time had stopped. My mind was spinning, trying to process the betrayal unfolding before me. How had I missed it? How had I not seen the signs? All the time she had brushed off my concerns, the sudden interest in looking nice for her appointments, the late nights. It all made sense now, in the worst possible way. But even with the truth staring me in the face, I couldn't bring myself to storm in there. I felt paralyzed by shock, disbelief, and this crushing weight of shame. I thought back to all the moments we'd shared, the life we'd built together. And now, it was crumbling before me, piece by piece. I don't remember how I managed to leave the clinic, but somehow I did. I drove home in a daze, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, anger, pain, confusion. But the overwhelming feeling was betrayal. By the time I got home, I felt sick to my stomach. I stumbled inside, collapsing onto the couch, and buried my face in my hands. What was I supposed to do? Confront her? Demand answers? I didn't even know where to start. Hours passed, and I barely moved. I kept waiting for the sound of her car in the driveway, for the moment when I'd have to face her. I rehearsed what I'd say in my head over and over again, but nothing felt right. I was angry, sure, but more than that, I was devastated. How could she do this to me? How long had she been living this lie? It was nearly midnight when I heard the door creak open. Emily tiptoed in, quiet as if she didn't want to wake me. I stayed still on the couch, my heart pounding in my chest. She slipped off her shoes and made her way into the kitchen, not realizing I was still awake. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up, my body trembling with rage and heartbreak. Where were you? The question hung in the air, heavy and accusing. Emily froze, her back still to me. Slowly, she turned around, her eyes wide with surprise. John? You scared me. I had a late appointment. Late appointment? I spat, my voice rising. You've been gone for hours, Emily. What kind of appointment takes that long? She blinked, confusion flickering across her face before she masked it with a smile. You know how Dr. Lewis's office can get? Stop lying to me. I shouted, the anger finally boiling over. I heard you, Emily. I went to the clinic tonight. I heard everything. Her face drained of color, the mask of calm she'd been wearing falling away. John, don't. I cut her off, my voice breaking. Don't try to explain this away. I know what you've been doing. For a moment, we just stood there, staring at each other in the dim light of our living room. I could see the panic in her eyes, the way her mind was racing for some kind of excuse, some way out of this. But there wasn't one. There was no getting out of this. Finally, she sank into a chair, covering her face with her hands. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice trembling. I never wanted you to find out like this. My heart ached, twisting inside my chest as I tried to wrap my mind around her words. How long, Emily? How long has this been going on? She didn't answer right away. When she finally looked up, her eyes were filled with tears. 6 months, she said quietly. It's been 6 months. 6 months. Half a year of lies. Half a year of sneaking around behind my back. I felt like I was going to be sick. Why? I asked, my voice barely audible. Why would you do this? Emily shook her head, her hands trembling in her lap. I don't know, John. I didn't plan for it to happen. It just did. We started talking more during my appointments, and I guess I felt like I could confide in him. And then, one thing led to another. I sat down across from her, numb. Confide in him? I echoed bitterly. You could have confided in me, Emily. I'm your husband. I know, she whispered, wiping away her tears. I know I should have. I don't know, John. Things between us haven't been the same for a while. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Had things really been that bad between us? I thought we were going through the same ups and downs every couple did after years of marriage, but apparently, she saw things differently. Apparently, she had found what she needed somewhere else, with someone else. I leaned forward, my hands shaking. So, what now? What do we do now? For the next few weeks, the house felt like a battlefield, except neither of us knew how to fight. We were polite, almost eerily so. We made small talk over breakfast, avoided each other in the evenings, and slept in separate rooms. Every time I looked at her, I felt the sting of betrayal all over again. Emily tried to apologize again and again, but every apology felt hollow. How could words fix this? How could a simple sorry heal the wound she had inflicted on our marriage? I tried to pretend that everything was normal, that we could somehow move past this, but deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, they did. It was a Thursday afternoon when I got the call. I was at work, trying to lose myself in the monotony of the day, when my phone buzzed. "John? This is Dr. Lewis. I need to talk to you." I froze. Why was he calling me? Did he know that I knew? Was this some sort of apology? I braced myself, gripping the edge of my desk. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice icy. There was a long pause before he spoke again. "It's about Emily. She's pregnant." I dropped the phone, my mind spinning. Pregnant? Emily was pregnant? And Dr. Lewis was the one calling me to tell me? I couldn't breathe. The room started spinning as I picked the phone back up, my hand shaking. Dr. Lewis's voice droned on, but I couldn't focus on anything he was saying. Pregnant. Emily was pregnant. My mind scrambled, trying to make sense of it. We hadn't been intimate in months, ever since I first started noticing her strange behavior. "John, are you still there?" Dr. Lewis's voice broke through the fog in my head, sharp and clinical. "I'm here," I managed to choke out. What are you saying? Is it yours?" The words tasted bitter in my mouth, my throat tight as I waited for the answer I already feared. Another long pause, and then, I don't know. I wanted to throw the phone against the wall, scream, punch something, anything to release the whirlwind of emotions tearing through me. But I was frozen, trapped in this nightmare. My worst fears, the ones I hadn't even allowed myself to fully form, had become real in the most excruciating way possible. "John, I didn't want it to happen like this. Emily, she doesn't even know yet." You thought you'd call and ruin my life a little faster?" I snapped, the rage bubbling to the surface. "You thought you'd tell me over the phone that my wife is carrying your child?" The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "John, I'm sorry," Dr. Lewis finally said, his voice low and heavy. "This is complicated. You and I." "There's no you and I." I cut him off, my voice shaking with barely controlled fury. "You had an affair with my wife. You destroyed my marriage. You don't get to apologize and make this better." I hung up before he could respond, the phone slipping from my hand and hitting the desk with a dull thud. I sat there for a long time, staring blankly at the wall, the weight of the revelation pressing down on me like an anchor. Pregnant. Emily was pregnant, and it might not even be mine. The betrayal that had already felt unbearable suddenly deepened into something darker, something I didn't know if I could survive. By the time I got home that evening, my emotions had swung from shock to rage to despair and back again. I didn't know how to face Emily. I didn't know what to say. Every time I pictured her, all I could see was her and Dr. Lewis together, and now there was a baby involved. When I walked through the front door, she was waiting for me in the living room, perched on the edge of the couch, her hands twisting in her lap. She looked nervous, and I knew instantly that Dr. Lewis hadn't told her yet. Of course he hadn't. "Hey," she said softly, standing as I entered the room. "Can we talk?" I stood in the doorway, staring at her, feeling a wave of nausea rise in my chest. I didn't know how to even begin. "Are you pregnant?" I asked, the words falling out before I could stop them. Emily froze, her face going pale. Her eyes widened in shock, and she opened her mouth to say something, but nothing came out. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. How did you know?" she finally whispered, taking a step toward me. I took a step back, the distance between us feeling like an unbridgeable chasm. "It doesn't matter how I know. Just answer the question." Her eyes filled with tears, and she nodded, her voice trembling. "Yes, I'm pregnant. I was going to tell you, John. I swear, I was. I didn't know how." I felt like the ground had opened up beneath me, like I was falling and couldn't catch my breath. "Is it mine?" I asked, my voice cold, flat. Emily's tears fell freely now, her face crumpling as she covered her mouth with her hand. I don't know." she whispered, her voice breaking. I'm so sorry, John. I don't know. Those words cut through me like a knife. She didn't know. She didn't know if the child she was carrying was mine or belonged to the man she had been cheating on me with. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but all I could do was stand there, numb, as everything I thought I knew collapsed around me. I need to know the truth, I said, my voice barely audible. How long have you been seeing him? How long have you been lying to me? Emily collapsed onto the couch, her hands trembling as she wiped her face. It started 6 months ago. I didn't mean for it to happen. I wasn't planning on any of this. But, I don't know, John. I felt like I was drifting away from you, and he was just there. Her words made me sick. Drifting away? That's how she justified throwing away our marriage. Because she felt distant? I wanted to scream at her, to tell her how much she had destroyed, but I could see she was already falling apart in front of me. So, you slept with him, over and over, and now you're pregnant, and you have no idea whose child it is. I wasn't asking anymore. I was stating the facts, harsh and brutal as they were. Emily nodded, tears streaming down her face. Yes, I know I've hurt you, John. I know I've ruined everything, but I love you. Please, we can figure this out. Her words, I love you, felt like a slap. I couldn't believe she had the nerve to say that after everything she'd done. Love wasn't sneaking around behind someone's back. Love wasn't betraying your husband with another man. I didn't want her love anymore. I stared at her, my chest tight with a mixture of rage and heartbreak. We can't fix this, Emily. You did this. You destroyed our life. You destroyed us. She sobbed harder, her whole body shaking. I know, but please, don't leave me. Don't walk away. We can. I can't do this, I interrupted, my voice cracking. I can't look at you without seeing what you've done. I can't stay here. I turned and walked out, leaving her sobbing on the couch. The weight of my decision crashed down on me as I slammed the door behind me, the sound reverberating through the empty night. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't stay there, in that house, with her lies suffocating me. I drove aimlessly for hours, the streets blurring together as my thoughts raced. How had this happened? How had my life fallen apart so quickly? I kept replaying the past few months in my head, looking for signs, trying to understand where it all went wrong. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't make sense of it. I drove for what felt like an eternity, my thoughts spiraling in endless loops. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the image of Emily in Dr. Lewis's office, the intimacy between them, the lies that now poisoned every memory I had of her. The streets were nearly empty, the glow of the streetlights casting long shadows on the road. I didn't have a destination in mind. I just needed to get away, to escape the suffocating weight of betrayal. Eventually, I pulled into a small parking lot next to a park. I killed the engine and just sat there in silence, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard I could feel my pulse throbbing in my fingers. I didn't know what to do, where to go from here. All I knew was that I couldn't go back to the life I had before. Not after this. The thought of her pregnancy gnawed at me. What if the baby wasn't mine? What if it was his? The idea that Emily might be carrying Dr. Lewis's child made me sick. How could I ever accept that? How could I ever raise a child that was a product of her betrayal? I leaned my head back against the seat, staring at the dark sky through the windshield. Everything was unraveling so fast. I had imagined us having kids together, raising a family, but now I couldn't even imagine staying in the same room with her. She destroyed everything. Suddenly, my phone buzzed in my pocket. For a moment, I didn't want to check it. I knew it would be Emily, desperate to reach me, begging for forgiveness, for a chance to fix this. But I couldn't avoid it forever. I needed answers, even if I wasn't ready to hear them. I pulled the phone out and saw several missed calls from her, followed by a string of frantic texts. John, please come back. We need to talk. I'm so sorry. I'll do anything. Please don't leave me like this. I love you. I know I've hurt you, but we can get through this. I can't lose you. I couldn't deal with it. Not now. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat and rested my head in my hands, trying to steady my breathing. Her apologies meant nothing to me right now. Words couldn't undo what she had done. Nothing could. As I sat there in the darkness, I realized something. The man I was, the husband who trusted his wife, who believed in love and loyalty, that man was gone. What Emily had done had killed him. I wasn't sure who I was anymore, but I knew I couldn't be the same man who stood by her side, who tried to pretend everything was okay. I needed to make a decision. I couldn't keep running from this forever. I thought about our life together, the moments that were now tainted by her betrayal. I thought about the plans we had made, the future we had imagined together. I thought about the promises we had made to each other on our wedding day, vows she had shattered without a second thought. And then I thought about myself, about what I wanted, about what I deserved. I couldn't live like this. I couldn't live in a marriage built on lies and deceit. It didn't matter if the baby was mine or not. I couldn't stay. I took a deep breath, the cold air filling my lungs as I made the decision that had been gnawing at me since the moment I left the house. I needed to leave her. There was no going back, no fixing what had been broken. We were done. I didn't know how long I sat in the car, lost in my thoughts, but eventually, I knew I had to go back. Not to forgive her, but to end things. To walk away from the wreckage of our life together. When I pulled up to the house, the lights were still on. My stomach twisted as I imagined Emily waiting inside, pacing, crying, probably hoping I'd come back and tell her everything was okay. But nothing about this was okay. I couldn't make it okay. I walked into the house quietly, the soft creak of the door announcing my return. Emily was sitting on the couch, her eyes red and swollen from crying. When she saw me, she jumped up, rushing toward me as if she could somehow fix everything with an embrace. But I held up my hand, stopping her in her tracks. "Don't," I said, my voice hoarse. "We need to talk." Her face crumpled, tears welling up in her eyes again. "John, please. I'm so sorry. I know I've ruined everything, but we can. There's no we anymore, Emily." I cut her off, my voice steady but cold. "I can't do this. I can't be with you after what you've done." She shook her head, sobbing. No, please, we can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can figure it out. I'll do anything." "I'm leaving," I said firmly, the finality of the words hitting me like a punch to the chest. "We're done." Emily collapsed onto the couch, her sobs filling the room as I turned and walked toward the bedroom. I couldn't stay here, not with her. I grabbed a suitcase from the closet and started packing, just the essentials. I couldn't think about the details yet, like where I'd go or how we'd handle the divorce. All I knew was that I needed to get out. I needed space. As I packed, I could hear her sobbing from the other room, begging me to stay, but I forced myself to ignore it. The decision had been made. There was no turning back. That I don't know how I made it out of the house. It was a blur, like I was moving on autopilot, too numb to feel the full weight of what was happening. By the time I stepped outside into the cool night air, my heart felt heavy, but also strangely light, like a burden had been lifted, even if it was a painful one. I loaded my suitcase into the car, pausing for a moment as I looked back at the house. It had been my home for years. It had been the place where we built a life together, where I thought we'd grow old, raise children, and live out all those dreams we once shared. But now it felt like just another reminder of a life that no longer existed. I got into the car, started the engine, and drove away, the house disappearing in the rearview mirror. For the first time in a long time, I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing. I was starting over, without her. The road ahead was uncertain, and the pain of what had happened would stay with me for a long time. But as I drove into the night, I felt a small flicker of hope, a hope that, maybe, I could rebuild. That maybe, one day, I'd find happiness again.